So, have you noticed a new bubble tea shop popping up in your neighborhood recently? Well, I can tell you, it is definitely not a coincidence. What you're seeing is a massive, and I mean massive, strategically planned global invasion by China's biggest tea brands. And today, we're going to break down exactly how they're pulling it off.
And look, when I say massive, I really mean it. Just think about this number. By the end of 2025, these brands are on track to have over 10,000 stores open outside of China. That is an absolutely staggering figure. For a lot of them, that's more locations than they have back home. The scale is just wow.
So that all leads us to the big question, right? How on earth did this happen so fast? Well, it's a crazy story of desperation, of brilliant strategy, and honestly, some very, very big risks. And we are about to unpack their entire playbook.
We've got 4 parts to this story. First, we'll look at what we're calling China's Great Tea Escape. Then, we'll tackle the 3 mountains they had to climb to even think about going global. After that, we'll get into the really cool stuff, their global expansion playbooks. And finally, we'll peek into the future and see what's next.
All right, let's dive into part 1. You see, this whole global takeover wasn't just about ambition, not at all. For a lot of these brands, it was purely about survival. They weren't just expanding, they were literally escaping a whole market that had become almost impossible to succeed in. To really get why, you have to understand this idea of involution. Think of it like a traffic jam where everyone is just burning gas but nobody's going anywhere. That's what the Chinese tea market became. By 2023, there were over 500,000 tea shops all fighting for the same customers. It was a market at its absolute breaking point.
And what's really wild is just how fast the engine stalled out. I mean, just look at that drop on the screen. In a single year, the market growth rate got chopped by more than half. The domestic gold rush, yeah, that was officially over. Brands had to find new territory, and they had to find it fast.
So what happens when there's nowhere left to grow? You get a vicious, brutal price war. Brands started slashing prices just to stay alive, and you can see what that did to their profits. Margins just collapsed. All of a sudden, those overseas markets where you could sell a single cup of tea for 2 or 3 times the price, well, they didn't just look attractive. They looked like a lifeline.
But here's the thing. Escaping the price war at home, that was just the beginning of their problems. As these brands rushed to go global, they ran headfirst into 3 enormous challenges, what the industry now calls the 3 mountains of expansion.
So what are these 3 mountains? First, you've got the global rulebook, a complete maze of different regulations. Second, there's the lifeline. You have to build an entirely new supply chain across oceans. And third, the wallet, surviving the absolute shock of how much everything costs overseas. Now, climbing even one of these is hard. Trying to climb all 3 at once? That's a monumental task. And this isn't just about filling out some paperwork. No way. Every single market is a labyrinth of its own rules. The EU wants 14 allergens labeled, the US wants 8. You've got sugar taxes, halal certifications, totally different food import standards, and one mistake can be absolutely catastrophic. There's a story of one major brand that got hit with a $100,000 fine in Australia and had to shut down stores, all because they didn't label milk and nut allergens correctly.
Then you get to the second mountain, the supply chain. Most of these brands have to ship their core ingredients all the way from China, and that lifeline is incredibly fragile and expensive. Just think about this for a second. It can cost $4 just to air freight 1 kilogram of ingredients. So if a shipment gets delayed or a batch of fresh fruit goes bad, your entire business can be paralyzed.
And this slide right here perfectly illustrates the third mountain, which is just pure economic shock. The business models that made these brands huge in China, they were completely useless abroad. In places like the US or Europe, labor can cost 5 to 8 times more. Rent for a good spot can be 3 to 5 times higher. You just can't run your business the same way. It's impossible.
So you've got these 3 impossible mountains. How in the world did they succeed? Well, that's the fascinating part. They didn't all do it the same way. Instead, what we see are 3 totally distinct and pretty brilliant playbooks, each designed to conquer a different slice of the global market.
So you basically have these 3 main playbooks. First up is Mixue, with what we're calling the scale playbook. Think ultra-low prices to swarm price-sensitive markets like Southeast Asia. Then, on the other end, you have HeyTea's luxury playbook, building a super premium brand in high-end Western markets where people will pay for the experience. And somewhere in the middle is Chagee's efficiency playbook, blending quality with a tech-driven, hyper-efficient operation. Let's really sharpen the contrast between the 2 extremes here. On one side, you have Mixue's strategy. Go everywhere, be ridiculously cheap, and just expand at lightning speed. They've got over 4,500 stores outside China already. Then, on the complete opposite side, you have HeyTea's approach. Be exclusive, be premium, and control every single detail in your fancy lab stores to guarantee that high-end vibe.
Okay, so how does a brand like Mixue even expand that fast? Well, their secret weapon is something called the master franchise model. The easiest way to think about it is like hiring a general contractor for an entire country. Instead of trying to find thousands of individual store owners, Mixue finds one big, powerful local partner and basically hands them the keys. That partner handles everything, finding stores, dealing with regulations, managing supplies. It's how they outsource all the risk and complexity, and it allows for absolutely explosive growth. So now that these brands have used their playbooks to set up shop in all of our backyards, the game totally changes. And that brings us to our final section. What does the future of this global tea war actually look like? Now, this chart is so important to understanding what's happening. Despite all this insane, explosive growth we've been talking about, Chinese brands still only have about 15% of the global market for fresh-made tea. That means a whopping 85% of the market is still up for grabs. They are, and I mean this, just getting started. And the pace is just accelerating. I mean, it all started with Mixue taking that first tentative step into Vietnam back in 2018.
Then, by 2022, you had brands like Chagee proving they could attract a majority of local customers, not just Chinese expats. And now, in 2024, you've got HeyTea launching these super high-concept lab stores in New York and Toronto. It's all leading up to that 10,000 store milestone.
So what's going to separate the long-term winners from the brands that just fizzle out? Well, it really comes down to these 4 things. They have to build local supply chains, period. They need to become absolute masters of global regulations. They must break out of that expat bubble. And maybe most importantly, they have to transform from just being a chain of stores into a truly global brand. Which really leaves us with this final thought. The true sign of success, the real test for any of these brands, it's actually pretty simple. The next time you walk past one of their shops, just look at the line. The moment you see more locals than expats waiting for a drink, that's when you'll know. That brand hasn't just expanded, it is truly, well and truly, conquered.